Star Citizen isn't continuing development because it won't make more money post-release, in my opinion. It's continuing because it can afford to. The amount of money this game has brought in while in development is unprecedented. Therefore, the studio has chosen to pursue an unprecedented timeline. But even if that timeline depends on delivering long-promised features, it's not necessarily a good thing. While some want to see the most ambitious project ever made go the whole distance, many just want a good game with the extra bits added on afterward. CIG is still struggling to tell players what a commercial release of Star Citizen looks like, and because of that, every single feature added garners some level of outcry as players call for the features to stop and the finished game to just be released. This model of developing the game so openly also leads to the belief that Star Citizen stays in development because it's better for the company and their bottom line. Both of these statements come off as conspiratorial at times, but they have some truth to them. This video is my opinion on why these types of comments pop up, why Star Citizen struggles to shed them, and what truth they may actually carry. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. While many may think of feature creep as the target of statements like this, some frustration also comes from the fact that Star Citizen acts like a fully functional live service MMO, rather than a game in development. The simple statement to stop adding new features and release a game is kinda silly on its own. The game needs new features to release. A player trading system, engineering gameplay, and multi-crew role assignment, org tools, a proper item ownership system, new missions, reputation progression, and economic balancing using an array of commodities and locations. From that angle, things like exploration are highly dependent on the things we would be exploring in and around. Caves, asteroid bases, derelict space stations, additional planets and systems, and the items within. Even the improved UI we'll be seeing in the next several weeks in MFDs are the kinds of things we just wouldn't have at a release if all feature development were to stop now, not to mention server meshing. There are plenty of little features that get worked on at any stage of developments that can or cannot be cut, but ultimately can lead to a more finished game. And at the end of the day, the devs just might want something small to be there that they want to be there. Imagine we could see GTA 6 or, better yet, GTA Online being made in real time. How many weird side features would seem to distract from the main point of the game that are just meant to offer minor enjoyment or immersion to the experience that maybe only 10% of the players will even notice? That all being said, there are some reasons why these statements still ring true. There are many places Star Citizen could slow its roll in order to focus on other things, though these would be long-term decisions and not something that could just be done for a few quarters or even a year without seriously shaking up the company structure. Because at the end of the day, most people following Star Citizen just want a solid game to play, one that doesn't need to be everything they've ever promised. So here are a few things I believe players do tend to refer to when they talk about stop adding the features, and a few things I think maybe you're getting caught up in that argument that shouldn't.
Hey, happy birthday!
Oh my god! We're under attack. Security's been overrun. Please, help us.
Global events run several times throughout the year. These events offer fun, group-based, and interesting gameplay for players. They're actually pretty well received and create much more prosperous game environment for the players, even if they are mostly focused on combat. But they come at the expense of traditional development in other places like general mission creation and other development focuses, which for a game 12 years in development is very notable to the player base and even more so to those on the outside looking in. Particularly, these events are also universally paired with additional ship sales, which help to fund the development, but leaves a very sour taste in players' mouths as they tend to be bombarded with messaging about buying more ships when many just want to enjoy the game itself. This only becomes more apparent as a lot of the things you need to do or know to fully engage in these events requires you to go to the event page on the website, which often has the sales information cleanly tucked in there, or even your cart located on the landing page of the website itself. This company is a marketing machine, and ultimately these events show, again, the attempt for CIG to phrase Star Citizen as an already released and running MMO as a live service, when really it's still in development, and testing, adding features, and tweaking things as if it was. For those who have been around long enough, I don't need to explain how Theaters of War rings of feature creep. It was a Battlefield 2142 style game mode that would live in Arena Commander and allow for larger scale mixed arms asymmetric battles between two teams. It was sold as a means of testing combat on a wider scale than what can be done in the persistent MMO, because once you died in the persistent universe, you were spawning back across a star system, which leads to less conflict naturally. The problem was the same problem all of Star Citizen deals with: stability. The game mode simply couldn't handle the amount of ships, players, vehicles, and space that was needed given whatever resources it had. And keep in mind, this likely would have been allocated a lot less back-end resources than Squadron 42, the Persistent Universe, or whatever work was going on for the Persistent Entity and server meshing technology pushes. But this was also introduced at a terrible time, winter of 2020, right before the pandemic began in earnest and development slowed down in different areas. While the testing this was meant for has started to show up more in Arena Commander since then, this was a pretty bad misstep on the development journey and a pretty obvious data point in the feature bloat argument. New ships are a very big reason for the stop adding new features argument as well. While they aren't necessarily new features, their development can pull resources from new features or the core pitch of the original game. Ships like the Reclaimer, the Mercury Star Runner, and the Argo Raft released without functionality that players would have benefited from, and vehicles like the Nova Tank, the Rock DS, and the unreleased RSI Apollo offer gameplay that likely would have never existed in Star Citizen's original pitch. And those ships that do release without their functionality generally take more resources later on when they have to be reworked to fit the gameplay that they were made for. After acquiring a large swath of the original Crytek developers to help build out the game engine and receiving the green light from the community to keep building the biggest game possible, things kinda changed from that original pitch. Star Citizen reached for a goal so big that the funding could only catch up to deliver what was being promised. Years later, and ships continue to be released, crowding the space, creating new combinations of components, and expanding the game in the name of funding development for those building the engine, missions, locations, and the single-player game Squadron 42. Without ships, the game doesn't get built, but every new ship, at least one that wasn't already sold and needs to be more than just a PNG file right now, makes some feel a bit more like it's never-ending new ships and features instead of the base game being built. Though that is also happening. And the base game is hard to pin down. Like I said, a major shift took this game in 2015 after Crytek bled many of its developers and CIG picked many of them up. At this point, the ability to build cities, outposts, and more importantly, fully explorable planets changed the scale and idea of the game. Base building, cave diving, distribution centers, explorable outposts, fauna, flora, and the resources that surround them would have likely only been a thought for expansion by the time that original game came out. Before that point, you were looking at an MMO that functioned quite a bit like Star Wars Outlaws. It would guide you on rails from orbit down to a city center where you could experience gameplay in bite-sized chunks in their own instances. This format of universe didn't need server meshing, or planetary approaches, or any other tech that allowed for a large seamless universe. It simply wasn't part of that original game. Planet tech has completely changed what Star Citizen is, and since its introduction, it's continued to ask for more features to help support the game space that it's introduced. And while I and many others from the old days and the new are in full support of what the game has become and aims to be, when players say they want less features and a more finished game, a lot of the time they're just calling for less of those features that they don't care about, which oftentimes have to do with things like planetary gameplay, customization options, and the higher levels of detail in game loops. Ultimately, Star Citizen will always be seen as a space game, so you can only imagine how every feature that's added to support planets and the environments within them can seem like just features for feature's sake. But let's talk about a couple things that I think do need to be in the game anyways. Cargo hauling is one of these game loops seeing higher detail added to this year. And I actually was surprised to discover that folks thought cargo hauling and manipulation shouldn't have gotten an update like this when the game still wasn't complete. Not only is trading with physical cargo part of that original pitch, it's a feature that's been broken and in need of an update for quite some time. Not only that, the rest of the game kind of depends on the movement of objects, cargo, and loot to work. It's certainly late, but this is not one of those features that I think would need to see decreased development. The same goes for engineering. Since its recent reintroduction to the conversation, some have sounded off about engineering adding more to the game for the sake of tedium or additional features. Again, this was part of the original pitch. Many design documents, presentations, and decisions have been based on the idea of component wear and tear, repair, multi-crew gameplay, and ship component health. While I understand this may not be the direction some want to see Star Citizen go in, this has kind of always been a big part of what makes small ships versus big ships a big difference in the game. Building an enticing, all-around enjoyable experience is important. A game is more than just the sum of its parts. While successful games oftentimes include more than the bare minimums they need to perform, such as high-level graphics tools, additional support for niche peripherals, and cosmetics, there's definitely a line on how much focus these things should be focused on against the bare-bone functionalities needed to meet the original goal. And certain developers are certainly not able to just be pulled from one set of features and mechanics to work on others. The ship team may not work on fauna creation, but funding the overall game is what calls for new ship sales. And if you watched my recent video about the ship development, you will know that many of these teams need to schedule to assist the development of various features like cargo, salvage, and engineering. So the crossover is there, and many players feel slighted the longer their particular gameplay of choice takes to reach maturity. But the argument of stop adding features and finish the game falls a bit short of providing feedback that I think actually makes sense. The game needs more features to be anything more than an incomplete game. For many, it just needs the right features. And even though we can't know what the right features are until CIG actually tells us what Star Citizen 1.0 is supposed to look like, this line of criticism is much more likely to warrant some productive discussion. But how long will the game go on for adding these features? Let's look at that funding argument that also tends to come up. I don't personally believe Star Citizen is intentionally adding features to continue a more lucrative development cycle than it might experience post-release. But like I said at the beginning of the video, I do think it's stuck in a cycle of simply being able to afford to do so. There are a few reasons why the game could make more money now than after release. Many people buy ships to help fund development. Many more buy ships to enjoy the gameplay that is available now to those ships with plans to melt or relinquish their fleets when the gameplay they want is mature enough to offer the whole experience they're looking for. If these options were taken away, you'd see less ship purchases in the name of helping the game and less in the name of finding fun gameplay. There has also been the precedent set that ship sales would stop after this future release. While I could see big ship packages and expensive concepts being scaled back to a more consumer-friendly level, I don't think CIG will stop selling ships of a certain tier to start out with something a bit more capable, and I don't think they won't offer the concept sales for ships releasing in the game shortly after. The fact of the matter is, this game promised and strove for far too much. It is shackled to a vision of a game that is incredibly difficult to achieve. No game publisher is going to try and beat Star Citizen at its own game because of this fact. So CIG doesn't really have to worry as much about the competition, but they do have to worry about delivering what they've sold. And that means they will always have to make money. Despite these possible reasons for the game making more money now than later, there is no doubt to me that a game which has seen an official launch that focuses mostly on marketing and onboarding new players and can be expanded to other platforms makes more money simply through the wider audience. Not to mention, the new player experience in Star Citizen is awful. They probably miss out on so many people being return customers to buy cosmetics and new ships just because trying to play this game can be enough to turn you off of it within a week. Satisfactory just recently left early access, and if there was a game that felt not in early access during its early access development, Satisfactory was it. For years now, it's been a great, inviting, and unique experience, but its popularity absolutely exploded after release, and that's not an incredibly popular genre. It just makes sense that when media outlets and word of mouth can talk about a game with a definitive release, model, and reputation, there's more possibilities of it reaching more eyes. And Star Citizen looks pretty good to the eyes when it works. Combine the possibility of several million new players with the huge amount of cosmetic potential in the game, and I'm not convinced they won't make more money after release. Ships, bases, hangars, apartments, space stations, vehicles, and all of the different areas included within those locations could see cosmetic microtransactions for millions that would make much more money than your latest ship sale for the 200,000 players currently paying attention. Not to mention, Squadron 42 is a single-player, cinematic, space-based FPS and ship-fighting game that could very well end up on game consoles. While its predecessor, Wing Commander, sold a few million copies, the market's much bigger now, PC gaming is easier to get involved with, and like I said, game consoles are always a possibility in the future. The earnings potential for that game, which hasn't been on sale since well before millions of players saw it for the first time just last year, is also not something to forget about. It ends up coming down to this. What is the goal of this game's development? Is it to build an expansive, continuously growing game, or is it to make the most money for the company itself? Or is it some combination of the two, as making more money for the company can have many end goals in and of itself, including funding more development in Star Citizen or the future Squadron 42 games, or even something beyond? CIG could have grand visions of becoming an Epic Games kind of company, curating a game engine to create multiple projects on the back of their initial investment, or they could aim for something similar to Rockstar, focusing on unique but widely popular projects and keeping that tech for themselves, monetizing the heck out of it in various ways. I'm not saying definitively that this game will make more money after release. I think there are good reasons to say it could both make more money now and post-release. I just kinda doubt the company doesn't see a good opportunity to monetize Star Citizen and work on other things in the future. Keeping the game in perpetual development in order to make money is one thing, but the alternatives just seem so much more interesting. And judging by the development we've been seeing, there really isn't much I see that isn't adding to a finished product. Of course, fixing the stability of the game has been stuck behind a wall for quite some time, and post-server meshing implementation, we will see if that gets better. But everything I'm seeing still points towards an end goal for the game, whether it's above or below our expectations. And that is why comments like these come off a bit silly to me. I think they're a little too simplistic in their delivery and they don't really get to the root cause of the problem, but they do have some truth to them. Just expand on your argument. You never know who might read it, what dev could be looking at it, or what wave of criticism you could bring on just by pointing out a flaw in some gameplay aspect. So make it make a little more sense when you type it out. Thank you for watching this long and drawn out video. If you still are here, I really appreciate you. I'm gonna reward you with a secret code to our upcoming CitizenCon ship giveaway because this must have been a marathon to sit through. Save that code that's on the screen right now and drop by my CitizenCon livestream on October 19th or 20th to get extra entries into our game and ship giveaway. I'll be covering the event with a pre and post show the whole day, and you can RSVP below. If you enjoy these opinion pieces and also want some development updates about Star Citizen, I'm posting on this channel every week, so consider subscribing here or checking out my long form channel, Space Tomato 2. I hope you enjoyed this one and learned something new, and I'll catch you in the next.